Welcome to the Let's Talk program. It's Black History Month, and we're going to celebrate just for a minute. You know this one. It's by Kirk Franklin. That's just a little taste of Lift Every Voice and Sing, and it's featuring Kirk Franklin and his choir. We are very happy to have as our special guest host today Faith Ashton Wiley.
Hi,
Hello.
everybody. Hi. How's everybody doing? I hope you guys are doing great. It's a pleasure to be on the show today and to be the guest host. This is pretty cool because I'm usually just I don't know the word for it, but associate host or guess what I'm
Co-host.
co-host. Yeah, that's the word. That's the word I'm looking for. So this is pretty cool today. So, today, everybody, is Black History Month, and we're going to start a series um, that, we like to go over where we want to introduce you to your actual host, Stephanie Anthony. And I know that, a lot of us are familiar with, local legends and unsung heroes and all these different shows that do a deep dive on African Americans of notable accomplishment. And so on Let's Talk for years and years, uh, you have been listening to your host with the most, Miss Stephanie Anthony, cheerleader for Jesus. But some of you may not know a lot about her personally. So we're going to take this opportunity in Black History Month to introduce you to your host. Um, just so you can get to know her a little bit better. And we're going to do this in an interview format style, a storytelling style. And so for this Saturday, when I am guest hosting, I would like to talk to our host, Stephanie Anthony, about growing up in Baton Rouge. So I feel like the best way to know how somebody got where they are is to start in the beginning. So, Sister Stephanie,
Yes.
I would ask probably, so let everybody know who, may be new to the show, um, what schools did you attend?
Well, I started out at Capital Elementary, and back then, Capital Elementary uh, was one of three schools built in a summer.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It- um, yeah, I think I'm saying that right. And so I didn't know what school I would be at. Before that time, all the kids in our neighborhood went to Greenville Elementary, and that summer they built South Greenville, Capital Elementary, and Eden Park Elementary. The population of kids, uh, black kids, was very great. And the federal government had said that East Baton Rouge Parish would have to integrate Eden Park. And rather than, because they hadn't done separate but equal. So, in order to not integrate, they built these schools that were separate but equal. And they were very, they were new buildings, new design, very nice schools. So, anyway, I, I started off in the first class of Capital Elementary, which was next door to Capital Junior High.
Oh, wow.
Back then.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And I know that, because I know you, you've told me, that you did have like preschool before
Oh yeah.
elementary school. So where did you go to preschool?
Well, I went to Nanan's daycare
Okay.
um, when when I was real young. I think I think my mother said I started school at 9 months, and then eventually I was a big girl and went to Miss Chris and Terry's daycare. And during the holidays, breaks, whatever, my Aunt Frankie kept me.
But what I love about this is like how we're talking about, your story, but also we're highlighting, female-run black businesses, back in the 50s. Um, and then, also talking about um, desegregation, talking about, people like they might not be connecting the dots, but you said it in such a way that the first thing that popped in my mind was, oh, so would you say there was a baby boom? You would say that you
Oh,
were a boomer.
a lot of us little colored children, yes.
Um, and you may not, some people may not know this about you, but I will share on your behalf, and then you can elaborate, that your father, um, Cleveland Ashton, had been a sailor in World War II. And, people, that are of my generation or younger, they may not, understand, the term baby boom, but they, say that, when the war was over and the jobs were plentiful and the food was plentiful, there was a baby boom. And then you came along in that generation. So, um, what was it like for you?
Well, I
Um,
don't. I'm not considered. Believe it or not, although it was a lot of us, we weren't considered boomers. It was the ones that were like 10 years before us that were considered the boomers.
oh,
So when they say okay boomer, then that skips over. They didn't name our group.
yeah, yeah, yeah. She's trying to exclude herself from being a boomer. You see it, but well, tell me, what it was like in Baton Rouge, in the mid to late 50s.
Well, I started at Capitol Elementary in 1959. I was kind of a young first grader. I was 5 years old. And so I can't tell you much about, well, I can tell you about Eden Park. I'm not so much on, I think I can't remember everything about because I was young.
Yeah.
But when I was growing up, um, our street was gravel, and it was before the city tied the sewage in. So there were ditches on either side, and these plants grew in them that we call elephant ears. I know that there's another name for them, but they were quite beautiful.
Okay.
And I can remember uh, later on when I started riding a bike. Oh, the worst thing! I didn't never want to ride a bike into the ditch because it actually, had sewage in the ditch.
Oh,
And before me, my mother had learned to drive, of course, and my dad was teaching her to drive. And on the street, they tell me, when in the evenings, everybody would come and sit on the porch to watch daddy teach mama how to drive. And back then, the all cars were shift cars. It was shift on the steering wheel. And so she had to clutch and shift. And back then, ladies wore heels and stockings on a daily basis.
oh man.
Now they're not, the 6-inch spike heels like chicks wear now, but
They're
they
practical.
wore pumps, I think,
Hmm.
was the term. And so it was the neighborhood entertainment. Daddy was not the most patient man in the world.
Oh,
And uh nobody had air conditioning. So everybody's window, not in cars. No, so the windows were down, and daddy was hollering, "Don't go in the ditch," whatever. Straight up. And so
oh,
everybody, they would have their dinner and run to the porch.
oh,
They knew
wow.
daddy was gonna be trying to teach mama how to drive.
But she did learn how to drive. She's a very
She
good
was a
driver.
wonderful driver.
Hmm. So, you were talking about them building the schools, to kind of, avoid desegregation. So I guess let's, you know, uh, maybe skip forward to you said you started out at Capital Elementary. So where did you end up?
Oh, I graduated. I graduated. We were the first graduated class. And you know, but I didn't, I guess I said that because I didn't go to Capital Junior
Mhm.
High because that would have been the progression that I expected. But my mom, who had who was in school when I was born, um graduated from Southern University and did her student teaching here in, well, I forgot where she did her student teaching, but I know she must have done her student teaching in Zachary. Um,
At Northwestern?
yes. And then she couldn't get a job in the parish. So she and other ladies that had graduated from Southern that year got jobs in Mississippi. And so they boarded in Mississippi and um, came home on the weekends.
Okay.
So by the time by the time I was graduating, my mother, who had been the first Miss Capital, moved to was hired by Capital Junior High, which was um, occupying the original Capital Senior High building.
Oh wow. Okay.
So since she was working at the school,
Mhm.
she felt that I shouldn't come and be a student at the same school where she was working. And
Mm,
so I went to St. Francis Xavier, a
okay.
Catholic school in South Baton Rouge, which at that time, Prim.
You kind of cut out a little.
Yeah,
You say at that time it was what?
South Baton Rouge was the creme de la creme for Black people.
Okay. Okay.
It
So I got to,
had everything.
oh, okay. So tell me about South Baton Rouge when you were a middle schooler. And then I have some questions from
Yeah.
some things that you said.
Well,
But just tell me about
they call it junior high because you went to sixth grade elementary.
it. Okay.
Then seventh and eighth grade was junior high, and then you went to high school in ninth grade.
Okay. Okay.
And I believe middle school they start at sixth grade.
They do.
Uh, Now, I'm sorry, what was the question?
I was asking, you said that South Baton Rouge at the time was the creme de la creme. And so I was asking you to tell me a little bit about South Baton Rouge when you were in junior high and about St. Francis Xavier.
Well, like I say, it was the creme de la creme back then. Um, you know, the doctors, the lawyers, everybody lived in South Baton Rouge, and um, they had the Lincoln Hotel, which was known throughout the South to, be at the time a state of the art hotel. They had uh, phones in the rooms, they had marble on the front of the building. Um, and they had the best restaurants, um, including like Louis Armstrong and all of those used to come um, to Dottie's, which their specialty was duck.
Duck is
And
delicious.
huh?
Said duck is delicious. Go ahead, I'm listening.
That was their specialty. And of course, there was Delpits, which still exists. It was knuckle sucking good back then, but it was more the working man's restaurant, so to speak, because one of their specialties was the po' boy.
Mm,
Daddy used to always say that when he, was a young worker in the South Baton Rouge area, that a po' boy was 75 cents. Now, a po' boy would have been the equivalent of uh, a Subway, not half sandwich, but a Subway whole sandwich.
mhm.
And at the time, he worked at Griffin's drugstore. So his job was to deliver prescriptions and other things by bicycle.
Oh wow, okay.
And so, you kind of needed, you needed something substantial. And the Delpis fried chicken po' boy was, the hit thing that would hit the spot. It was delicious and it was filling. It was large. And by the time I came around, Bernard's was still going strong. That was a restaurant that I enjoyed immensely for their fries. They made you a cone of fries out of butcher paper,
Mm.
so you would have uh, the equivalent of, but see, they were so big, but you'd have the equivalent of four large McDonald fries
Mhm.
for like 35 cents.
Oh wow. That's good. You know, it's funny listening to you talk about restaurants of your childhood, because there's this show that I have been watching on Disney Plus. They made a show out of the movie National Treasure. And I believe I texted you about this and tell you that it's set in Baton Rouge. And so they have, showed the new state capitol, the old state capitol under the I-10. And then last night I was watching a couple episodes of it, and guess what showed up? The restaurant Frost Top.
Frost Top.
And I was like, oh, that's home there. So, it's interesting,
Frost Top
how
with its root beer.
that
And
gigantic root beer cup.
the sign is still there. In fact, I was there for something, and I was just downtown. I said, "Oh, let me go to Frost Top." It's a whole different ownership and everything, but they still have the frosted mugs with
Mm,
that delicious sweet
hmm
root
It's
beer.
good. It's
Yes.
good. It's good.
And so I posted a picture, and people were like, they were saying, I didn't know it was still open, but yes, it's still there. So South Baton Rouge had the movie theaters, of course. It had McKinley Senior High School, where uh, they were the blue machine back then, and they still are now.
Now, didn't
Uh,
you tell me that your dad would take you to the movie theater at
yeah,
night?
well, if we went now, let me explain.
Okay.
For when Mama was working in Mississippi, we went to the movies every night. Um, I think it was a quarter for adults and free for lap babies. And I guess he carried me, and I don't know. Anyway, uh, we went because they had air conditioning. So
Mm-hmm.
Daddy would give me my bath, put on my pajamas, robe, and slipper socks, and then we would go to the movies. And by the time the movie was over with, of course it was nice and cool outside. And
Mm-hmm.
so we could go home and go to sleep. I used to think all the time, because movies back then, there was a cartoon and then the movie. And by the time, and it was always, I remember, Westerns. That's what he took me to. And his best friend, Floyd Maple, I said to him one time, I was like, I don't know, saw the same movie every night. And so I always fell asleep. And Brother Maple said, no, you were not seeing the same movie every night. He said it was sequels. This was at Capitol Avenue Theater,
Mm-hmm.
which later became St. Paul Catholic Church.
Okay.
But at the time,
Mm-hmm.
uh, he said they were showing a review from the previous, installment. And so I would fall asleep thinking we had just seen that the night before. So I enjoyed the cartoon, and then I was sleeping, snoring probably by the time, the real deal movie was showing.
Okay. Okay.
So Daddy didn't have no trouble out of me. I was
Wow,
out for the count.
that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome.
Now,
So,
for a family, now later on, my sister was born, and we in the evening we would on Saturday, some Saturdays he took us to the movies,
mm,
and we went to this drive through restaurant, which was the
mm,
building is still there in South Baton Rouge. It had umbrellas, and you could drive to the window and put in your order. I
mm,
always got a hamburger, the junior burger, I guess. And
mhm.
I don't know what they got, but I do remember that my sister Clevetta always got their specialty, which was a hot dog uh, smothered in onions and tomato sauce
Oh wow, okay.
and an orange cold drink.
Ah, okay.
And halfway through, she was just trying to stuff herself. But halfway through, she would always give out a big burp, which I
Oh,
thought was so gross. But
the kids will be kids.
and Daddy said, "No, that's cute." I was like, "Oh." So that was to the Lincoln Theater,
Okay.
and sometimes my mom on Saturdays would before my sister was born, she would drop me off at the Lincoln Theater. And this was the first time I ever saw kids out of order.
You mean
They
like not in line?
Because it was no adults in the theater.
Oh.
It would show a triple feature.
Mm-hmm.
So mamas all over town just drop their kids off with some extra money for popcorn and a candy bar. The sugar would kick in and they was jumping and throwing popcorn and hooping and hollering until the movie came on. Then they would sit down and shut up.
Okay.
But that
Okay.
was the first time I ever saw kids out of order was in the Lincoln Theater.
These are kids in their own element, not at school, not at church, just having fun.
Cut loose. They were footloose.
So now we're gonna get back to school, but I know that I recall you since we're talking about you at this age. I feel like I recall you talking about when you guys first got a TV, or was it a color TV or something? You because and what brought it up to my mind, you were saying that the Lincoln Theater had the hotel had phones in the room, and I feel like I remember you saying that when you first got a TV. How old were you?
I don't remember that. I'm going to tell you, TV used to be on just a few hours a day. And then TV would be off. And you turn the TV off. What I remember was that, uh, well, I must have been kind of young because I remember during the morning time, there was oh shucks, what was it? Oh, the other day I was thinking about it with Miss Pat. Um, there was a children's program on in the mornings. And then after that, I believe Buskin Bill would come on.
Buckskin Bill.
And Buckskin Bill came on again in the, later. But if memory serves, Buskin Bill came on twice a day live.
Okay.
And and uh, my mother was so excited because they announced that Buskin Bill would be on in color.
Mm.
And that's the first time I remember anything about mentioning about color because up to that point, even the movies were in black and white.
Okay.
So um, when I was just wondering how would that work? Color TV. I was thinking, well, somebody was sitting there with a crayon, coloring fast, fast. I was just wondering how would that work?
Yeah.
And my mom was all excited that the day that Buskin Bill was going to be in color, She sat me down, turned the TV on, and it was still in black and white. And she was so disappointed. Daddy came home that evening and she was like, Busky and Bill was supposed to be on in color and it didn't come on in color. And Daddy said, well, Helen, you got it came on in color, but you got to have a color TV, So
That's the story. That's the story. Color
yeah,
TV.
so neither of us knew anything about a color TV, but and it was a good while before we got a color TV. But the first uh, national TV program that I know of that came on in color was Bonanza.
Hmm. Okay.
And even now, if you look at, reruns of Bonanza, it looks like a movie.
Hmm.
It's just, just wonderful. And if you watch old movies, they have CinemaScope, Triacoscope, this and that, color, because it was so long before there was color.
Hmm.
And I can remember the scariest program I ever saw in my life was King Kong.
Oh yeah.
It had been in the movies, but they brought it to TV.
Hmm.
And I was over at my Aunt Frankie's house. It must have been a Saturday because all the kids was there, and
Hmm.
we sat down to watch King Kong. And I was like, I thought, why? How is this entertaining? This scary monster of a gorilla terrorizing, and Lil Fay Ray in his big hands. I mean, I just
King Kong still making movies now. Don't sleep on King. They still making King Kong movies, and they done had him
here.
versus Godzilla, and oh, it's still popping. So, um, we talked before we get too far into. I think we're gonna go back to junior high. Before we go back to junior high, we talked a lot about your about your parents and, because you were a kid. And that's an integral part of, kid life is their parents. So, where were your parents from?
uh, um, Actually, one was from the north and was from the south of Louisiana. Daddy was from Head Island, and Mama was from Dubuisson. And because McKinley Senior High was the only high school for colored kids, back then it was like going off to college. They were each the youngest in their families, and they came to Baton Rouge to go to high school.
Okay, okay. And I know you said, that your dad was from Head of Island. So for people who may not know where Head of Island is, where is that?
I guess its big city would be Gonzales,
Okay,
and it's on the Amite River.
okay, okay, cool. And then for people that don't know where Dubuisson is, where's that?
Its big town would be Bunkie, but its real big town would be Opelousas.
Okay, okay. All right. So I mean that gives the listeners a feel for, like, where in Louisiana they came from, and how, like you were saying, Baton Rouge had the highest school, for people of color, and they traveled far to be able to come to high school.
Yeah,
And
it's like kids go to away to college.
so that's, again, we're still, like, we're talking about you and your story, but we're also talking about, the story of, Black people in Baton Rouge, in the South, during an era that, people don't, people kind of gloss over.
Well, my mother, of course, came from Dubuisson, and that's exactly not Dusson, Dubuisson, which was a plantation town. And she boarded in Baton Rouge with a lady in Eden Park who they call Mother Coleman. And Mother Coleman uh, apparently, at one point, my daddy used to drive her around.
Mhm.
There were not a lot of cars, you know, back then, but apparently he had one at some point. Now, of course, Elder John Earthly used to always say that he drove my mom and daddy on their first date. He never would tell me where he took them. That I probably wouldn't have never been born if he hadn't, drove them, for their very first date, and they hit it off.
I never knew that. That's
That's
pretty
what he
cool.
would. Oh, he told that all the time. I never did go and ask mama or daddy about it because he was so exact about it. But I do know that later on, um, that daddy used to drive Mother Coleman. And I can remember Mama boarded there, and I can remember Mama saying, uh, that she did well in school, and her mother, by that time probably was living in Tampa, and she would be very excited about her that she had made an A in this or that, and that Mother Coleman couldn't read. So she didn't really, appreciate what all the hoopla was about.
So, and I know that, hmm, I feel like I know that, that your dad, um, could speak French, but didn't.
Now say again.
I said I feel like I know that, your dad could speak French, but didn't.
Yeah, Daddy understood French, but I never knew him to speak French. But
Yes.
my
So,
grandmother,
mhm.
who eventually lived to be 106, when I was very little, before, when I was young, she barely spoke any English, you know. And then later on, I was in elementary school when she started raising um, three of her granddaughters, my cousins. Before then, of course, she had raised eight kids. She had eight kids, four boys, four girls. And later on, when they came, she started to speak less and less French. And, then one day she didn't speak French anymore.
And the reason I brought it up is again because we're, talking about your story. We're also talking about the story of, being African American or Black growing up, in Louisiana. And, now, you have organizations like Coderfield, that are trying to, make sure that French is not lost as a part of Louisiana heritage. But there was a time when your father was growing up, that, as I understand it, they didn't want them to speak French in
They
school.
didn't want them to speak French in school when during my grandmother's time, and my daddy said that they punished them. Now my cousin Joyce, um, they lived on 46th Street, the Johnsons. She said that she caught the worst whipping of her life because she laughed at our grandfather, who well, our great grandfather, who if I met him, I don't remember it. You know, Maman Corrine's father, because she said he talked funny, and he spoke French and nothing but French. And she said he had a beard, and she was laughing at the way he talked, and mother took her outside and whooped her.
Or no. But
but
I mean,
daddy,
huh?
but daddy said that um, they punished them in school for speaking French, and
You
he also used to say that my grandmother was very fair. Mama Corrine was very fair, and he said she'd be sitting on the porch, and they called head of island is next to French settlement, and they called um, the Caucasians Frenchmen, and they'd be sitting on the porch, and somebody passed by, and he said, one of the Frenchmen would say, "Corinne, there go your kin people," and she get mad because they was talking about somebody white, you know, you know. But
occasion sense of humor. But it's important for for legacy and culture, for listeners, to understand how it came to be that, black people in Louisiana stopped speaking French and that they used to speak French, how this happened, why it happened. And you don't know, if people, don't discuss it. And on the topic of French, I think didn't you tell me that your mother originally wanted to get her bachelor's in French?
she did.
Can you tell us
Um,
about that?
yes. After she graduated high school with honors, she wanted to become a French teacher, and but Southern didn't have a major in French. They didn't even have a minor in French, as far as I know. Uh, and so she applied to go to LSU, but they turned her down. They said no because she was colored. And so she went to Southern University and she majored in English and social studies. And she taught English and Louisiana history over at um, Capital Junior High.
So that kind of brings us back to junior high school, but I wanted to just kind of segue into that, because um we think about things oftentimes in a modern context. We'll think about things from the past in a modern context and think about, oh, well, you can, go and do whatever you want to do and, be whatever you want to be, but the road to that was paved um, with, a lot of people having to, make sacrifices while also still, coming to a great place of accomplishment. I know that say a lot that she got her master's plus 30, but you know, it's interesting as we were talking about uh, your dad, coming from a home where French was spoken, but it was discouraged in school, and then your mom, wanting to, go to college to be a French teacher and having to adjust that, and then how now we live in a time where very few, I think, and I could be wrong. I'll just localize it to central Louisiana in the Baton Rouge area. Very few black people speak French in the home. Um,
Yeah.
and so, we're just kind of, I thought it was interesting to kind of dot over, how that came to be, just in the context of your family. your family life. So we're at um, junior high, and you're at St. Francis Xavier, which, if I understand it, is still there.
It's still there. Our class picked the mascot for the school. We picked,
Really?
mhm, we
Who's
picked
mascot?
the Mustangs.
Okay, okay, okay.
So yeah, our class picked that.
That's
You
pretty.
gonna say what now?
No, I was just gonna say that's pretty cool.
Well, by the time I went, believe it or not, and I think this is very important. Before that time, St. Francis Xavier had an elementary school, uh, a junior, junior high, and a high school. But they brought through the expressway, and the expressway would have gone right through the high school. So they tore it down. So they never rebuilt, and so they didn't never, there went the Black Catholic high school.
Okay. So you did, I guess, answer the question without me having to ask it. I was gonna ask, at the time, was St. Francis Xavier, an all black school?
Oh yeah.
So you did answer it.
Now let me tell you. Now this is so funny because for a long time I had my yearbook,
You what?
my
Oh, yearbook.
yearbook from
Yearbook.
St. Francis Xavier,
Okay.
and something came up one time, and I said, well, I went and my yearbook, it wasn't a big, hardback. It was a little, paperback yearbook, but we had one. We were junior high, and I think it was Catherine. The conversation came up. I got my yearbook and passed it to her, and something she said, and I was like, "No, St. Francis Xavier was an all black school." And she was like, "What these people here got blonde hair and look like they got blue gray eyes?" And I was like, "Yeah, but they black." All right. That's how they roll. Yeah.
But no, I'm glad you're bringing it up because that is some something that is very
The
unique
Domains and the
to
Derricksburgs.
Louisiana culture.
Yeah.
That there are black people of all shades, with
Yeah.
all hair colors, with all eye colors, and it's not something that started after the 70s in Louisiana. um, you know, people have been mixed race people, mulatto people, Creole people. It's baked into our culture. Whereas these things are becoming nicely more common in other parts of the country. Um,
But we didn't consider them mixed race people.
well, no, I know this is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like now they might consider it that because in other places becoming far more common, but it was just a very like almost a subculture of people in Louisiana. And so when you go places uh
Well, everybody got some high yellow people somewhere in their family in Louisiana.
in
Somebody got,
Louisiana, but
yeah.
that
In fact, my my aunt Lizzie, uh, was very very fair, and my uh her parents, my grandparents, were not. They were, chocolate. And it wasn't, oh, I was grown before I had always heard the story that my great great grandfather had gone to um he was going to buy something, and he always kept his money buried, and he was going to go and dig his money up. but he never came home. His horse came home and he didn't. But it wasn't until I was grown that I found out that my great great grandfather was a white man married to a black woman. So, you know, I'm trying to say. When it gets down to the great great greats, you know, nobody remembers to tell you.
We're having these conversations, so that the listeners can get to know you better, so they can get to know Baton Rouge history better, Louisiana history better, and then also, hopefully so that it'll prompt conversations within other people's families, where they may ask their mother, their grandmother, their aunt, great aunt, how did our family get to be what it is? Where did we, how did we get to this place where we are now? We spend a lot of time TikTok, YouTube, Pinterest, Instagram. It takes up a lot of our conversation time. And, we want to not have this, where we have a generation of kids and young adults that are coming up that, uh, can't trace their heritage. They can't, things will be so wildly different by the time they come than it was when you were a child. And if nobody is around to say, well, black owned female business is not new. It's making a resurgence, or to
Oh
be able to.
man, like I didn't know. You, I just so many things I didn't know. All the cabs belong to black people. I thought, in my world, you know, uh, uh, all the laundries belong. I thought to black people. All the corner stores were black people. It was a while before. Yeah, not I won't say all, but it was a while before I remember the Italians, having stores, but they did, and they survived longer than we did. In the black community, Leon's grocery, became Vietnamese, you know, but um, all of the essentials, including the black newspapers and, all of the essentials, because of segregation, we had our own.
This is an interesting, idea and topic to be considering. That um, there are we're seeing a lot now of people, wanting to connect with their roots, connect with their heritage, wanting to trace that black identity that is uniquely um, ours, across the United States, and in other places. And I think one of the things that is helpful with that is talking to people. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can, find out, especially, I'm sure some listeners, not in Louisiana, might be scoffing, but there's a heritage that, that is unique regionally. And we just happen to be talking about, Louisiana heritage right now. But, one of the comedians that I like so much, Trevor Noah, says that, as a growing up in South Africa, people think that America is a monolith, it's all, that all the people are the same. But when you come here and start, touring as he does as a comedian, and you find out that regionally people are very different, and it is a united individual states. Um, and so in this segment, we're just taking the opportunity to look at uh, South and Central Louisiana through the years, through the eyes of one special Stephanie Anthony during Black History Month, highlighting um, how things have changed, how they've remained the same, how we got to the places that we are now. And so I thought it would be a great way to start off by talking about your childhood. And I think time has almost been really well spent. We're gonna round out junior high, and then I will leave high school and college to next week. But I'd like to know a little bit more about your early childhood in Baton Rouge. We've talked about, a lot of serious things, some fun things. I remember one fun story that you told me was about the Baton Rouge Zoo and Penny the elephant. So maybe,
Yes. Buskin Bill really believed that Baton Rouge needed a zoo. And so, in fact, he would close out at his show saying, but Baton Rouge needs a zoo. And so, one thing he wanted to do was raise money for an elephant, which would be um, Baton Rouge's first, big attraction. And so he invited kids to for the penny walk where they could walk on the set of the Buskin Bill show and deposit their pennies. And kids just, saved up pennies to, uh, come on the show and give for the elephant. And my little sister, was one of those many Baton Rouge kids that, did the elephant walk, and they played a little music, da 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 da, and little kids would march by and pour their pennies into the container, and later on he got a safe. You could pour it, pour it into the safe. But yes, that was the first big attraction. There was Penny, and the zoo was just, Penny didn't even have a house, It just there was Penny and some snakes and alligators and raccoons. That was the zoo. But
and look how far
if
it's come.
you yeah, if you talk to people in our age group, they'll all say, yes, we built a zoo, they and that's why when they were trying to move the zoo from its current location, that's why people were just very invested in them not, changing the zoo because that was a childhood memory that they wanted to hang on to.
I think that's really, really, really beautiful. And since it's now, I'm seeing the commercials that Disney is celebrating their 100th year, which is pretty cool. I don't know if it's a hundred.
Disney
I,
can't be 100 years old.
I'm wondering about that
Uh-uh.
too, but they got the big 100 on there, and they say this their 100-year celebration. Maybe it's 100 years since his birthday. I don't know,
Oh,
but it's a
now that
hundred.
might be true.
It's 100 years. Um, we're gonna have to come back with next week on what their 100 years was. But I think a good way maybe to
But
round out the show is you would tell us about people may not people of my age group, maybe a little bit older, probably wouldn't be aware, that Walt Disney would say he would come on TV.
oh, now let me say that the original Disneyland, we made the trip of a lifetime. My family drove cross country to go to Disneyland, which was in California. But he always would tell on the television program about the wonderful world of Disney, which is Disney World. And he would show the drawings and how it was going to look. And we really were invested in his vision. And so it was, to final, I mean, it was just wonderful. Disneyland was wonderful, but it was land bound. It couldn't get any bigger. And so they bought all that land in Florida and built Disney World in Orlando. But Disneyland still exists. And
Hmm.
of course,
Very
they're
popular too.
very but it was land bound. It couldn't get any bigger.
Mhm. So, I think a good way to, end the show.
Oh, Sister Claudia has said something. She says that Disney is celebrating 50 years. Now that sounds about right.
I want to get that 100 on there. Oh my God! Look, y'all. I could be wrong. I'm a Google this, and I'm gonna send Sister Stephanie back with an answer next week because I won't be here next week, but we'll get an answer to this. Uh, but I would say maybe a good way is to, since this is our episode on childhood, and I know you know the words, maybe a good way to end the show today is the now it's time to say goodbye.
Oh, to all our company, MIC. See
Okay.
you real soon. KEY. Why? Because we love you. MOUSE. Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse.
Donald Duck.
Forever let us hold our banner high, 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 high. Come along and sing a song and join the family. MICKEY. MOUSE.
Yay!
Yeah, I sing that to my granddaughters.
Well, you guys, it has been absolutely wonderful talking to Sister Stephanie today about her early childhood in Baton Rouge. We'll pick up, well, I won't be here, but she'll be here with a new guest host picking up next week, talking about high school and maybe even college. And by the end of the month, you will have a full picture of life in Louisiana, um, and you'll get to know your host with the most, your cheerleader for Jesus, a little bit better. You have been listening to Let's Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you guys have a wonderful, blessed day, a great weekend, and a wonderful week. Thank you all.
Bye bye. And thank
Bye.
you so much for asking me all these questions that brought me down memory lane.
It
Till
was so
next
fun.
time, God bless.